Who said we weren't already going?
Oh, well, how's everybody doing then?
I hope they're doing well. I'm doing
Yeah,
well. Are you?
yeah. Welcome to the podcast.
I found corn
Where
right
on Cornhub? Oh no, that's a corn keyboard. What the fuck?
here.
That is the ugliest color scheme.
I actually
Holy
don't hate
crap!
it.
Oh, I hate it. I think it's horrible.
Oh my gosh. So how's everybody been? Leave a comment. We want to know. We want to know.
Yeet.
What have you been up to?
I've been working on a Windows Vista laptop. Very fun, very interesting stuff. I'll talk about that. We'll do another podcast at some point where we talk about some PC build projects and just I'll cover that in its entirety at some point.
Can we
That's taken up a lot of my time.
do a conversation podcast on custom keyboards too?
Yeah, I'm down.
Yes. I'm so excited. That's what I've been working on. But today, Evil Within.
Yeah, and the evil without.
Evil Without.
Yeah,
With
the,
with
the
with
you can't have the evil within if you don't have the evil without.
we got the light without and the evil within.
Yeah.
Um, I have a disclaimer, okay? In this
Okay.
episode, I might sound like I hate this game. I want to make it very clear. I do not hate this game. I do not. I promise.
I'm really excited for this.
I actually have a lot of nice things to say. It's just the bad stuff really got me ticked off.
I'll be right back. Hold on one second.
Whoa, he'll be right back. So yeah, that's pretty much my full disclaimer. I don't want to give anything away, but if you've seen my playthrough or you watched the playthrough of The Evil Within, you already have a general idea of what I'm talking about. I had a very rough time getting this game to run. I had a very rough time managing frame rates,
I had to
and
hydrate.
gotta get that water, my guy. Shout out to Stay Hydrated Bot. So with that said, Red, just take it over, man. You got this. You know what you want to say.
I love The Evil Within. It's one of the fucking greatest games from Shinji Mikami's entire lineup of games ever. Like the man's is a genius. He is absolutely a horror comedy genius. There is nobody quite like Shinji Mikami when it comes to making a gross, disgusting, amazing mess like this.
True. I have
Honestly, I
absolutely nothing bad to say about Shinji Mikami at all. Like his work and his contribution to this project was incredible. Incredible.
Shinji Mikami is a genius.
Did he
100%.
did he work on Ghostwire Tokyo?
I have no idea.
I think I mentioned that he did, but I don't remember. Uh Ghostwire Tokyo Shinji Mikami game
He sure
HD.
did.
Oh, yeah, he sure did. I loved Ghostwire Tokyo. I'm just gonna throw that out there. Incredible. But I have the
Yes,
exact same qualms with Ghostwire Tokyo as I do with Evil Within.
fucking Silent Hill fan.
It's not about Silent Hill. And it's
It's-
got nothing to do with Silent Hill, believe it or not.
you're just a hater because it's a Resident Evil game.
No, that's not why.
It's
I love
not even a
Resident
Resident
Evil.
Evil game.
Do you want me to like lay out what I don't like and then you can argue your point?
Yep, you go for it.
Evil Within is gorgeous. Its body horror is unparalleled. It also has a phenomenal storyline that, if you're paying attention, makes sense. However, the fallacies and extended content is so unnecessary, but it's beautiful. And that's one of the things like when I said I had to step away and like really think about how I felt about this game, those were like the main qualms I had. the story directs itself in a way where obviously we're not supposed to have all the information, and that's completely fine. Shinji Mikami likes to do that stuff. Ghostwire Tokyo worked the same. Dino Crisis worked the same. Almost all the Resident Evils he worked on the same. Piano 3, God Hand, etc. But at a certain point, the red herrings get annoying. Setting things up for the player to like get upgrades where those upgrades are meaningless because 90% of the bosses in the game can just one hit you regardless of your health is frustrating. And it's not frustrating in a sense of we're taking away the player control. It's frustrating because you are not the antagonist of this story. You are a spectator controlling Castellanos. And I don't enjoy that feeling. Like the game feel of just knowing that at any moment you can get slung up by a trap and die and have to start all over is frustrating to me. I don't feel like that's good game design. You having mic issues? Ooh,
We good?
technical difficulties.
We good?
Yes.
Okay, I was gonna say I have a huge issue with the perspective on this game. Like from a gameplay standpoint, this is an
Gameplay's good.
RPG. This is an RPG 100%. It is a game where you are meant to build your character to be a certain way the first time through. Either you are a stealth player or you are not. And like there's a little bit of leeway in between to cross over with some things. But
Mhm.
generally speaking, like it is an RPG, not an extremely linear experience. It's meant to be played in many different ways.
Absolutely. But I still feel like the RPG element kind of fell flat. I did better in Evil Within 2, which is sad to say because I know Evil Within 2 is not as beloved.
But
But
that
I
whole game
prefer
is an
it.
RPG. That
I
whole game is an
prefer 2.
RPG. Here it was just having RPG elements,
Right.
right? It was
Right.
it was RPG elements in what was ultimately still a survival horror action game.
Right. And I appreciate all of that, right? Like I think all of that was super cool to see the creative influence of these extremely talented creators, right?
Right.
I just don't think the execution worked for
Man, I
me.
have to I have to disagree. I feel like that's a character build issue, and I really have to disagree. Because I don't share many of those problems, and I know a lot of it has to do with how you build your stats and your character over the course of the game. Like what stats you have when, and strategy, a level of strategy to your stats really does affect like the overall experience. And even if you played through it years ago, playing through it again right now, you're not going to retain every bit of information about the game to go back through and be like, yeah, I know exactly how to buff my stats to make this work perfectly. It's a Resident Evil game. There are always going to be some one hit kill things. There is in every Resident Evil game ever.
Mhm.
That's just how that is, right? But like when it comes to boss creatures and things like that, if you're taking too much damage and it's situational, that is definitely how you build the character issue.
I didn't have any issues other than some of the game feel. Like the mechanics are obviously just a little out of date for what we're used to playing these days.
The
Um,
shooting is a lot like The Last of Us. I don't care for the shooting in The Last of Us. Like I don't care for the shooting here. The engine was brand new. The
mhm.
style is very blurry and very clunky. But that is a very small part of what makes this game otherwise incredible.
Yeah, yeah, I can agree with that. I mean, uh, at the end of the day, there are a lot of things for people to take away from this game that are extremely good. And when I say extremely good, I mean like these should be staples of game design moving forward in the horror horror survival playlist. But there are things that are just bad. Like the overuse of filters can be very jarring. I understand that's a cinematic perspective, but at certain points it's just like I want to see the game I'm playing.
I mean, I'm not even sure if it's like cinematic perspective, I'm pretty sure it's just like areas of the machine not functioning properly.
Oh, of course you could. Yeah, like I said,
You know,
it's a
it's supposed
director
to play
thing.
on the yeah, it's supposed to play on the psychological horror. You notice it's always different, and it's to make you feel different emotions at different times. There are a
Hmm.
lot of colors to make you feel agitated before a moment where you're obviously not supposed to be agitated. You need to remain calm. That's to trip you up and keep you moving away from the direction you should be going.
Right.
You know, the game trying to win the mental game above you. Psychologically, it's an incredible way of manipulating the player.
Absolutely. And that's again, these are just like the things that make it so difficult for me to talk about because I want to walk away from the Evil Within saying this is a 9 out of 10. This is a phenomenal game. This is something everybody should pick up. But the mechanics made it very difficult and jarring. And I know I don't want every survival horror to feel like Call of Duty. That would be terrible. That wouldn't be fun. That would be awful. But at no point did I really feel afraid of anything because I knew one hit kill situations were going to happen regardless. Run segments were going to happen regardless. And it felt very old school to just throw a wall in front of the player that they can't see, and then you get tripped up on it and you have to watch this death scene and then do it again.
Something definitely worth considering here is when this game was released because of like what it is and what it does. The time that it was released definitely matters to how all of this horror plays out and how the game carries itself. At the time, we had things like Amnesia, The
Mhm.
Dark Descent, and Slender: The Arrival. And I think the closest thing to release with this was Alien Isolation, which was good in and of itself, but a totally different kind of horror.
And
It
Outlast
was
was a year before.
right. Outlast was a year before, and even that was like the kind of horror that it is just so much different than what the Evil Within is. The Evil Within
Absolutely.
is a much more trippy, visual, image-based psychological thriller that is more akin to like its Silent Hill and early Resident Evil counterparts.
Yeah.
Whereas you play a game like Outlast, and it's more like
Haunted
modern
House.
technology playing Sanitarium from the 1990s.
Sanitarium.
You know I'm fucking right. That is
I mean,
exactly what Outlast is.
in a sense, yeah.
With less hallucination.
The Evil Within, I feel like it could have benefited from more peer review when it came down to some of the gameplay aspects. I understand that like escaping some of the buildings and being out in the open spaces were supposed to be like this clarity sensation. That's when the characters were really realizing what they had to do because it wasn't a fight or flight situation. And that all works in a sense of real people dilemmas. But from a storytelling perspective, it really just felt like it dragged. Does that make sense?
Right, but exposition kind of I mean, I can't really defend exposition too much. Exposition is kind of just always there. It's a limiting factor for a lot of things. Not many things get exposition incredibly right.
Hmm.
I agree this game has a few moments in its story that drag unbelievably and it just takes forever to get through. Like crawling through the asylum when it's falling apart about mid-game, it's just one of the longest most or the turret section in the destroyed city in the late game. That shit is just unbelievably tedious. It's
Right.
all unnecessary stuff that really is just there to drag shit out a little bit more.
I'm not a fan of turret sections at all. Like as soon as they brought out the turret at the end of the game when you
I
get to
am not
shoot
a
at.
fan of turret sections either, but the inner city section has you constantly switching between guns and running for supplies. There's something interesting about how dynamic it is that keeps it fresh and isn't doesn't just make it another on rails turret section.
Funny story. If you go watch my Let's Play, I just stand there. I don't do anything. And I just beat it perfectly fine without taking a
That is
single hit.
that is very unfortunate.
Hmm. But that's exactly what happened to me when I played it on the PS3 as well. I remembered that very fondly of just like certain segments where doing nothing is the best choice. Because then you could just collect all the resources.
That's an interesting perspective.
Hmm.
But then you end up without nearly enough brain juice or ammunition to play the
I
end game.
actually ended up having
So
more
like
because the enemies would ultimately get onto the bus. Remember the bus segment? And if
Yeah,
I
but it's a
just
lot
run
like,
around and I do circles and then I let the teammates shoot them, I just pick up everything that they drop.
but that's like a Resident Evil 4 veteran saying the Ashley Carr segment at the end is incredibly useful if you just do nothing and stand there and shoot. It is, yes, but to anybody who hasn't played through the game many times, being able to react to everything that fast, getting the timing of enemies down, knowing what direction that your teammates are yelling at you and knowing what to listen for, that shit's something that like comes with playing the game once or twice.
True. But I don't feel like it's a justified argument to say the evil within is better your second time around. I just don't like my suspension of disbelief was broken every single chapter. My I was taken out of the game so frequently. Like I just couldn't connect with Castellanos. I couldn't connect with Kidman. I had a really difficult time putting myself into
You
that
shouldn't.
world.
That is a hard thing for me
Subjection.
because in this particular instance, I found myself caring so much about the antagonist. I wanted to know more about the villain, and it wasn't even, even if the obvious shit was obvious from the beginning, I wanted to know more about the villain himself and his part, like what led to this ultimately,
Yeah.
because it was personal decision and real emotional storytelling that goes into something like that. The breakdown of a person so unstable as Ruvik, it's an incredible piece. So it was never about Sebastian or his friends for me. It was always about Ruvik and what Ruvik was going through. That's why I didn't like The Evil Within too,
Hmm.
because the villain was Sebastian's daughter. What the fuck is that about? Like that's not you already know what happened to her, so the only thing you really can do is sympathize for what's his name in the moment, and he's not a likable guy. He's not made to be a likable guy. He's the James Sunderland of the story.
Right.
He's kind of a piece of shit. He's washed out. He's a drunk. That's who Sebastian Castellanos is.
Hmm. Yeah, and I felt like at a certain point in the midpoint, I felt like the writing staff wanted to ham fist you sympathizing with Castellanos as much as they could. And they were writing all of these letters about his wife and this and that. And some will argue that they were setting up the evil within too. Sure,
I
fine.
would argue it was satisfaction and punishment for some of the shittier things Sebastian you learn about Sebastian throughout the game.
But is it
Like
nasty
you,
of me to say I don't care?
I mean, I don't care either, but like if you read and you pay attention to a lot of the shit and you are getting emotionally invested in like the story from everyone else's perspective, you start to see him as kind of a piece of shit. And near the end, you're like, yeah, man, I can't sympathize with this guy. Literally any form of punishment for this guy would be satisfying.
Because in the
Maybe
beginning,
that's just me. Maybe that's like the sadist in me.
no, I understand completely because in the beginning of the game they don't set you up to like Castellanos,
Right.
and
And they
then
don't set you up to tell you they're going to punish him either, right? They just make you feel like, oh, he's a dick for being a dick.
and then this quote unquote punishment is also quote unquote his job because his wife was also a detective and then she quote unquote came into contact with something and had all these files. But like logically speaking, and I'm only speaking logically, it doesn't make sense for her to withhold all of this information. Like as a detective, you would think she would have a staff of people going over these documents as well. That's literally the point of being a detective.
I
It
don't know if you played the DLC or not.
No, I can't. I can't.
Okay, so spoiler alert. Chat, spoiler alert, everyone, spoiler alert, just for the sake of it.
Came out in
Uh,
2014. It's almost 10 years old.
the biggest punishment for Sebastian ultimately was having his life destroyed by who ultimately was his best friend and partner throughout the entirety of the game.
Hmm.
Like that is the satisfying conclusion to what is otherwise a heartbreaking story about a poor mental patient who was ripped from treatment and stuffed into a machine. Like,
Well, okay, that statement. So, from what the story tells us, is Ruvik was forced to go into the machine by the doctor, correct?
right,
He was taken by the three, whatever, henchmen that he brought in during the one dream segment or whatever it was.
right.
So, from that, he took his living experiment ideologies and incorporated them into his god complex within STEM, right?
Right.
Because he's pretty much the central processing unit of STEM.
Right. The only issue is like a lot of that self-serving behavior is uncontrollable. It's psychosis. It comes from being deranged. It's they picked an unstable patient to run psychological experiments in STEM. That's the whole point. So the
See,
system
that's not
itself
what I
is
got.
unstable, and it makes Ruvik more. It's effectively torture.
Right, I
It's
got
it's like
that.
pushing him to his, and that's kinda what you need to play the DLC for, is to see things from
I
other
watched
people's
it.
perspectives. Like,
Uh,
there's even the safe head guy has a much more compelling and reasonable story than Sebastian does, and a lot of the
Okay,
explanation that comes with those things is
that's something I found difficult to understand. So, the woman spider creature that you burn was Ruvik's first love, correct?
right.
The safe is the machination of the doctor and his secrets, Ruvik's secrets. That's kind of how
No,
I felt it
well,
was explained to me,
the safe is an unfortunate bystander at best.
because it's not a person hooked up to STEM, right? It
No.
was a
Yeah.
person. It was a person, and then it divulged after death into what it became.
Right, and Ruvik kinda kept it mentally as this torturous thing he could fuck with.
Got you. Okay.
Yeah.
Which is
It's his
why Ruvik
tormented
doesn't
soul
show
more
up
than
when
anything.
she's around, but Ruvik will show up when the safe's around. That
Right.
makes more sense. Like I think the story and the pacing and its explanations all are very well held, and there's a lot to understand there.
Right.
It's just everything else. World design, incredible. Puzzles, mediocre. Gonna be completely honest.
For 2014, one of the most visually stunning games of the time period.
Absolutely.
Inarguable.
Mhm.
It looked fucking incredible then, it looks fucking incredible now.
But that's also a tough because May 20th, 2014, Wolfenstein: The New Order came out. We cannot sit here and say Wolfenstein: The New Order wasn't gorgeous.
It was, but also one of very few. You know what I mean? That's kind of the whole point. There were games that obviously were pretty from the time period, but how many games were willing to put the effort into being that kind of pretty? Grand Theft Auto 5 when it re-released, uh
Right.
and Alien Isolation.
Yeah.
Horror games tend to put detail into the world. They give
Yes.
a shit about what they're showing you.
Uh, I also have qualms with some of the segments because I feel like some segments where you see Ruvik's little office that he was working in, and he has a literal torture device in the room right there. And I couldn't help be like, he didn't keep any of this under wraps at all. It was just there out in the
He's
open. People just saw him torturing people. Like,
he's raised in the back room to be the apprentice to some fucking lunatic doctor. That was his whole life, was staying in that experiment room, working on shit with the doctor, learning to do what the doctor did.
right. Just
So I don't think
it
I
was
don't think
just
anybody
some of the
saw.
placements. It was just some of the placements. And then Ruvik freaks out, kills his parents, and that's a whole thing. And I just felt like, okay, what does parenticide have to do with, like, are you just telling me he's crazy? Because we figured that out like 3 hours ago.
Something that often gets forgotten when you pay attention to the little details in this game specifically is that everybody's mind affects the world inside of STEM.
Right.
Not just one or two people, not just the protagonist or Ruvik. Everybody who has ever been in STEM affects STEM, and that means all of the NPCs you meet have been in at some point and have had an effect on how this world is playing out. They have almost physically dynamically changed Ruvik himself with their own twisted and warped perceptions.
Right. I just struggle liking a lot of it. Like I don't care about a lot of what they tried to get me to care about. I just didn't care. I don't care about Kidman. I don't
You
care about
rarely
Joseph.
care. You rarely care, though. That's just it.
Yeah, because it really does depend on. Not everything can be Elder Scrolls where you're this name or Legend of Zelda or whatever, where you're this nameless hero creating your own path, right?
You
Sometimes
like
you have to,
being the protagonist
or
rather
the
than a story
antagonist.
being rather than a story being told to you. You like to be the story.
That's why I feel like most RPGs should be held, and that is like to me a basic standard.
But The Evil Within is only an action adventure game with RPG elements.
True.
It's not an RPG. The Evil Within 2 is an RPG. They full sent it with the RPG, decided that was the direction they wanted to go. And I agree with you there in that regard. But with the first game, I can't even look at it like that. I have to look at it for what it is, not what it could have been if it were something else.
Do you think Evil Within is like the end of an era?
No, I think it was the beginning of an era.
Really?
Yeah. I think after The Evil Within came along, Silent Hill Downpour was the closest thing to it we had gotten in that time period, 2012, right? It was the only thing like it that came out in that time period. So, like, if that was all you had for third person horror, The Evil Within must have been fucking stunning. It was standard setting, and it was the beginning of a whole new age for third person horror games. It kind of gave this new life to the idea of third person horror games not only working, being long games, but also just being games that like could appeal to more than one horror crowd. Because there's the jump scare horror, the tension horror, you've got kind of point and click adventure type moments. There's inspiration from everywhere.
Mm-hmm. Maybe I'm just not into this style of horror.
I think that's it. I think that's why you have a hard time with the Resident Evil games too. Like they're never top of the line for you either.
They're up there, but they're just not top. You're right.
Yeah.
And every time I play a game like this, I want to love it. Like I go into it with so much love and passion because I have a passion for horror, but just in a different sense. I think that's why I enjoy so much of the psychological aspects, the deeper understanding, a lot of the nuance of the game I really enjoy. But then there's just this layer of scrutiny that I have with inconsistencies.
I have to bring us back to the medium for a second
Go ahead.
because I feel like a lot of your problems with the Evil Within are directly translated to the medium.
Okay.
You know, and it's not so much that like they're even similar games, they're not even close in the way that
Mm-mm.
they carry themselves. It's just that when it comes to the storytelling, their psychological horror element is much lighter than everything else.
True. True. My main qualm with the medium was it was simple.
It was the furthest fucking thing from simple. I have no clue what you're on about.
We're different
I've been
gamers.
playing through it again for a third time and I still have so many questions.
Yeah, but generally,
Uh,
besides the medium 2, which isn't out yet, you can pick apart all of the pieces by playing that game and generalize what we can expect for the next game.
It does something that I usually hate in games and couldn't hate there though, you know.
Mm-hmm.
That's just it. They killed the protagonist at the end, and it was in a moment where it felt contemporary enough to work.
Right.
It wasn't like Outlast where you worked incredibly hard to do something and then you killed the protagonist. It was more like she was walking into death anyway.
Mm-hmm.
She was already dead, regardless of what was going to happen. And you were just working out the final moments.
I had the same disclaimer for the medium, didn't I?
Yeah.
Like I love so much of that game, and then there's just this layer of ugh that I have to slog through to enjoy it.
Right.
But I keep saying inconsistencies. May I get into some of the inconsistencies with the Evil Within and see how you feel?
Sure.
Number one, he has a 9 millimeter, the or 45 caliber. Sorry, let me get the correct gun. The entire time, and we see it several times, but you never use it. What's up with that?
I
Why?
think it's a matter of limited ammunition.
But why? It's such a unnecessary point in my opinion. Oh, we get the revolver. Sure. And then in every cutscene where you get grabbed by something you have to shoot, all of a sudden you have a 45 slide action pistol? What?
It's interesting that you say that because that might be a you problem. There is a point in game where you're supposed to get the burst handgun, and it's canon that he picks it up.
Never once saw burst hand pistol.
You can get the regular handgun, and once you hit New Game Plus, it becomes the burst handgun, and that
I didn't get it for the new game plus either. I got the machine gun and the RPG.
I don't know. I fucking
That's why I'm saying it's an inconsistency because I don't know. I feel like I trekked over as much ground as I could. To my knowledge, I didn't miss anything. I didn't see anybody else with the regular slide pistol in their playthroughs when I was glancing around in the DLCs. It was just this weird, out of nowhere inconsistency. Every time it happened, I was like, why the fuck does he have a 45 Glock all of a sudden? I think it was a Colt. It was just weird. It was weird. I didn't like it. That was one little, very minor qualm. It might have just been an oversight, whatever, right?
it is an oversight. Because that is the starting weapon you use in the Evil Within 2. They just give you the regular handgun off the bat. Honestly, it could be that he couldn't use his gun and had to use something he found in the world. But it's
But he
hard
does
to.
use it. He does use it. That's the problem. You shoot Ruvik with it.
No, he shoots Ruvik with Kidman's handgun
But where did he get it?
from Kidman.
How? Kidman had a gun.
I
Kidman had two guns?
maybe.
I don't know. It's just this weird, odd inconsistency I noticed throughout the story.
That is a strange. I really can't defend that. That's an odd, but that's like Leon pulling out the handgun in Resident Evil 4 during
Right,
cutscenes,
right.
even long after you sold the fucking thing.
It's not
You
a
know,
big deal. I just noticed it, and every time it happened, I had to point it out. I was like, there it is! There's the Colt 45. Why? Why can't he just have the revolver?
they did give him the 45 in the Evil Within 2, so
That's
that got fixed eventually.
weird. And it was low poly, and it looked funny. And when he shot it, the slide doesn't go back. It's weird. It might have just been like an unfinished weapon. Or I don't know.
That might have been a visual glitch and not intentional.
No idea.
I'm not gonna lie, that doesn't sound like that's supposed to happen.
Another thing I noticed was boss damages not being reset after death. Super weird. So during my playthrough, there were certain times when I would just get one shot by the boss, right? Because that's how
Right.
this game works. Doesn't matter how much health you have, whatever, you just die. Oh, I hit a piece of collision and now I'm dead. Super frustrating. Hated that. Whatever. Give me a chance of recovery. Put me at 1 HP. Whatever. Give me a chance of recovery. I don't like one shots. Just a subjective opinion.
But
But
on the other hand, to balance those one shots, they made it so that if you already had done a lot of damage to a boss that could do that, you could go back to it without having to worry about the damage you had already done. And it works with the stem in world, right? Because he doesn't physically die. He's just like killed in the stem and then put a little bit far back. Think of like a Vita chamber from Bioshock.
Oh, don't worry, we're getting there. Don't worry, we're getting there. Because I have some qualms with this as well. Um, the woman that you burned, whatever her entity name is, I don't know. Um, during that segment, did you know you can skip all of it?
Yeah,
Because
I've seen the speed runs. That is a huge, huge, huge skip. It's like 35 minutes worth of game that you pass through.
right. So here I am running around burning her on every single thing that you're supposed to burn her on, thinking, oh, there's probably some sort of invisible health meter, or this is just what I'm supposed to do because the game is obviously a puzzle. You're supposed to figure it out. No, if you just hop down the ladder and she jumps down after you, and then you climb up the ladder and shoot the little thing that makes her go burn, you can beat it in like 2 seconds.
Right. It's a lot like Resident Evil in that you can cheese the fuck out of it sometimes. Something that feels like it's going to take forever can be over in a few seconds. That's why the parts of the game that drag when they do tend to do that, because in reality, if you're playing the game as smart as that in every moment, the game only takes like 3-4 hours.
Right. Which brings me to my next problem. So, she isn't dead, supposedly, because she shows back up later, or there's another one, or something. Don't quite understand how that works. STEM is a parallaxing event. Who knows?
She wasn't there to begin with.
But
She
she
was a
can kill
creation.
you?
Yeah,
I
she was
don't.
a so other things in Figment's fucking weird Ruvik's weird Figment-filled mind. Like that's just how the whole game is. Things that fictional things that Ruvik has materialized with his brain kill you all the time.
Right. Which brings me to the second chase scene. Um, they set up all of these fire traps, and I'm like, oh, I need to use the fire traps, and after so many, she'll leave me alone. Turns out, no, not at all. You're just running through hallways you've already been in. That's it.
Right, you kind of just run her around in circles. And that's the whole point. The game has many subtle small tricks that you figure out so that when you hit New Game Plus, you're like, fucking easy, I got this, no problem.
But you see where my issue is. There's no game. It's
There's
just
tons of game.
run.
There's tons of game. You have to do a lot to figure out where the couple of running segments in between like all of the what about the running segments where they have you stop and solve speed puzzles?
Oh, I hated
Those are
all of them.
awesome.
Hated
I
all of them.
love those. You don't feel the stress that any regular person would feel in that situation, right? They
Because I'm a
incredibly
game
simple to
designer.
you. They may be incredibly simple to you, but to the regular consumer who is actually
True.
fucking scared of the evil within, they're gonna feel the pressure in that moment, and even a simple task will feel impossible.
I'm hard to scare.
Right. But you're not making this isn't the evil within making a game for you. This is the evil within being a game for the general consumer. A game that hits some nerves for some people. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
That's what
I could
that stuff is
totally
for.
see. Yeah. I like the people who were afraid of Akira growing up in the 80s would play Evil Within and be like, this is fucking terrifying.
You could make the argument
100%.
you can make the argument that the evil within is a lot like Elden Ring in that it is made for a certain kind of person, and
Hmm.
that person is going to get the most enjoyment out of it.
Like you enjoy Elden Ring, right?
Right.
You
But
enjoy
nowhere near to the extent that you did.
right. I have 350 hours in it. I've done 4 speed runs. I was one of the first people to do a no level up run. That's just who I am. That's the kind of shit that I enjoy.
Right.
It's funny that
And
you
I
bring
feel
that
like
up because I actually referenced a lot of Elden Ring and I was like, oh, here we go. It's another grafted monster because I just thought it was funny.
I mean, it's very similar to Elden Ring in a lot of regards. You know, it's not the same game, not the same timeline or setting, but
Oh, of
who
course
what
not.
how the game is made, who it's made for, how
Yeah.
it carries itself. Those
Niche
things are very
communities.
similar. I mean, I wouldn't even say it's niche. I would just say it's like
Well, horror's
built
interesting like that, you
built
know?
with a level of alienation in mind.
Mhm. Horror is interesting like that because I feel like a lot of people who are maybe just getting into the horror video game space think a lot of horror games are similar. And sure, they have a lot of tropes that could be similar, but like at the end of the day, like we compared Medium to Evil Within and Resident Evil, each one is their own independent style
Right.
of horror.
Right. All of these have different things that make them horrifying in their own regards. Resident Evil is a very tension horror based game where they mean to build up the pressure and then hit you with something that feels a lot stronger than it is.
Right.
That's how that was Silent Hill hits you psychologically. They twist your brain and twist your thoughts and make you unsure and paranoid about everything. Then you get
Exactly.
games like Splendor that are just jump scares,
Mhm,
you know? Which is fine. Some people are into that shit. You get body horror and gore in other later Resident Evil games and games like The Medium,
mhm.
which is a lot of visual horror in what it does.
Silent Hill 3 is a good example where they went with a
Of
lot
visual
of
horror.
visual body
Right.
horror, this
The
very
introduction video to
psychedelic.
Silent Hill 3 is one of the greatest introductions in
Oh
video
yeah.
game history, and I fucking hate that game, but I love that intro.
And it's fascinating. It's fascinating because like I like Outlast 2, I don't like Outlast 1.
I
I
am the same way. I don't care for Outlast 1. I think it was a wasted opportunity, but Outlast 2 is so fucking incredible.
I still to this day argue that Silent Hill 1 is the best, the epitome of horror. Other people
I
are going
there
to
he
disagree.
fucking
Yeah,
goes
you're going to
talking about
disagree.
Silent Hill again.
Like
Here he fucking goes.
I know that the Resident Evil zombie turning its head is like iconic. Obviously, it's an incredible, this massively well produced, tension building, the reality of the situation is now dawning on you scene, right?
Right.
I just think Silent Hill, its entire world building is just better.
But that's not,
That's
but that's incomparable because Silent Hill is building a world around the guy who's in Silent Hill, and that's
right.
how that works, right? Silent Hill builds itself around the main character.
Not
Resident
always.
Evil is the main character in somebody else's fucking predicament. You are effectively somebody who is not supposed to be somewhere just trying to survive long enough to get the fuck out.
Well, I would argue Silent Hill still has that. Like Harry Mason, obviously he was
He was
called to
supposed to
go there.
be
He
in
was supposed
Silent
to
Hill,
be
though.
there.
Yeah, he was supposed to be there. The guys in Resident Evil,
But
they
in
aren't
it,
even supposed to go to the mansion. They were just investigating
right.
missing people in the mountains,
That's what I was
and
gonna
they
get
get
to.
chased into the mansion. You
Like
know, they're forced there.
Cheryl, aka Heather, we don't have to get into the whole soulspiracy, um, is the reason why
Conspiracy.
that's what they call it in the community.
I don't even the soul spirits. Y'all are a bunch of nerds.
Big time. Harry was not supposed to be there. The reason why he's there is for his daughter. That's why the monsters are so normalized. They're not overly grotesque throughout um Silent Hill 1. That's why a lot of them are insects. His fear is insects. They make that very clear, which is why James Sunderland's experience in Silent Hill is so much more grotesque. And then obviously Heather's in 3 is way more grotesque because she literally had the demon inside of her, so she saw the demons for what they were. That's the story. Evil Within does that as well, where you are seeing the demons not only of Joseph's, of Kidman's, of Castellanos, all the other NPCs, the Doctor, Ruvik. They're this amalgamation, body esque horror. And I think all of them work so well. So well. Like, I don't care what game you're looking at. When you use psychological horror like Resident Evil, like Silent Hill, like Evil Within, monster designs are the winner, the de facto winner in these stories.
Right. Well, Resident Evil's biological horror works so well because
So
the
well.
reality of the situation is they're genetically modifying humans, and the human body cannot take these modifications. They're ripping and shredding and tearing themselves apart to become these fucking incredibly grotesque creatures.
Awesome.
You know, things have
Awesome.
already died. They're not even dead. They're just losing flesh and falling apart because the mutation itself is unsustainable.
Right. Ethan Winters is obviously an exception. and his
Ethan
daughter.
Winters is the most fucking sad and tragic story told throughout Resident Evil, and if you don't understand Resident Evil 7 and 8, there's something wrong with you.
Go play them again. They're
Like,
really good.
if you aren't incredibly sad about Ethan as a human being, there's something wrong with you.
Mm-hmm. Is he a human? I mean, there's a deeper conversation there.
He is absolutely a human. He's so fucking human that it's painful when the ending comes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. I see what you mean. Yeah. Shout out to our boy.
Yeah.
Rest in peace. Maybe. We'll see.
I don't know. You haven't played Village yet, have you?
I played Village. I played it with a couple friends at the cabin.
Uh,
It was easily phenomenal storytelling. But again, my issue, the slog, is what it is.
I didn't think Village had any slug. I thought it was perfectly paced, man. It is one of the greatest level designed games ever made, and I'm willing to argue
Gorgeous.
that.
Gorgeous.
Oh my god. And it's laid out so well.
So
Everything is
well.
findable. You're led in the right direction. Like there's enough freedom to let you explore, but also enough to tell you where the fuck you're supposed to go.
I talk about and I ham on this concept called landmarking. Holy crap. If you are learning landmarking and map design and level design, play Resident Evil 8. Holy shit, they do it
It is
so
so good.
well.
It is so good. The yellow tape design is something that I'm glad they stuck with after Resident Evil 7. It really does fit into the world and make the whole thing feel a lot better. And it's recognizable, and your eyes are drawn to it when you see it.
So good. So good.
It's like the red in Mirror's Edge. You really can't not have it.
Landmarking is so important. Have good landmarks. New Vegas, you have Novak, you have the giant soldiers for the what are they? The base for the
Yeah, the big guys shaking hands out by
yes,
the long the long whatever the hell.
right. And you have the farms, and that's clearly the farm area. You have
Right.
Vegas Strip. Landmarking is important.
You can see the Yangtze Memorial from across the map when you're standing at the strip, and you can see the strip from the Good Spring Cemetery.
Good. And you can see the cemetery. Was it a windmill?
Yeah.
From all over the place. And it's like, oh, so direction is so important. Give players good direction.
The
Oh,
roads, even though the roads are broken in pieces in Fallout, always lead you in the right direction. The roads are very well made.
yep. They always
And
take you somewhere.
I've been through the creation kit. I've seen how many assets are actually laid down in that game. I know the effort that went into that. Obsidian is nuts. I can't believe they pulled that off in a short amount of time.
So good. We really need the ham on landmarking more because oh boy, a lot of game developers need better landmarking. Like I love Ghostwire Tokyo. Its landmarking was trash. And I know there's the argument of it's a 1-to-1 scale of not Shinjuku, not Tokyo. You go into Tokyo, but it's oh, I was looking at apartment there. It doesn't matter. But I still need good landmarking.
Since we're talking about the Evil Within, I think the Evil Within did landmarking really well.
Mm-hmm.
You always knew when you were getting close to a save room by the music. You always knew where you were going by the fire, usually.
Yeah.
Or the barbed wire. There were things that told you where to go and what you were doing, and that it was good. The amount of guidance for what was there was good. And even in the beginning, in the stealth segment, in the beginning, there's a lot of guidance that isn't just tutorial in your face, that shows you what to do without telling you.
I need to make something very clear to the audience real quick if they choose to watch my playthrough. If you see me die, and Red can attest for this, it's probably on purpose.
Yeah, there's a good chance it's on purpose. You can usually tell when it's on accident because there's like a genuine level of what the fuck just happenedness to you.
Yeah. Like this is gonna be this is gonna sound terrible. I'm pretty good at games. Like I know what I'm doing. I'm sorry. Typically, if I die, it's either I actually had a skill gap that I had to overcome, or it's on purpose. So I am leading to something. after I burp because I'm drinking Pepsi. Um, the checkpoint system sometimes is way too lenient. That's just a
You
qualm
are
with me.
you are expected to die. Did you know the Evil Within 2's hard difficulty is made to match the Evil Within 1's normal difficulty?
Yep.
That's how hard that game was intended to be. If you could you imagine the headache you go through when you play that game on its hardest difficulty and just how tedious it is to get through some of the things where the radius for certain things is increased and enemies are a lot more persistent.
Mm-hmm.
Like some of that shit is rough.
I mean, my first time loading into the Evil Within, I was like, oh, I'll play on normal. I should be fine. And then I was one hit by a normal enemy, and I was like, yeah,
No.
fuck that.
Yeah, no. Playing on normal is playing on hard. That is how the Evil Within goes. The normal experience is you are going to die a lot. Be prepared for some pattern recognition.
I just did not have the time to sit there for 20 hours. It's and then
I was
the
gonna make a Mega Man
cheese.
comparison, but you don't like Mega Man
Mega Man
either.
sucks. Why do
Yeah.
people like that game? It's not good.
I liked Mega Man X1, and that's it. I think.
Everybody can like whatever they want to like. That's what this podcast is all about.
Right.
Right. It's
We're just
all
gonna scrutinize the
subjection.
hell out of you and also give our subjective viewpoint.
Exactly. Red already said like he thought it was funny that I struggled with this game. Fine. That's fine. It's
I
not my
think it's
kind of game.
funnier that I think it's funnier that you struggled with this game than it is that you struggled with Silent Hill Downpour because like in that instance that game was kind of poorly made, but in this instance it was just like wow, that some of this shit is like really funny from my outside perspective. My idea of what should have happened there is so much different.
Right. Like you're talking about like the blurry room with the puzzles where I
Right.
obviously killed myself on purpose.
Right.
Like,
So
and you're like, ah, you dumbass. And I was like, clearly I know what's going on.
I gotta harp on it a little bit because like man, what a fucking dumb way to die in game.
It
Honest.
is.
That's like
It
getting
really is.
It's like getting smacked by the guy with the chainsaw in the village segment at the beginning. Like that is such a generic and easy segment. You don't even have to do it. You just run in a circle. He never touches you, and then it's over eventually.
Right, right. But sometimes, especially when you're doing Let's Plays, like if I was playing this casually, it would have been a completely different story. But when you're doing Let's Plays like I do, if there's a unique enemy or if there's something happening on screen that's, might have a unique death, 9 out of 10 times, I want to see that death scene. I want to at least know, as I have no plans on coming back to these games anytime soon. I want to know what it looks like. What does
Yeah, you're not
Castellanos look like choking on the gas? I want to know.
you're not like me where if you just have a feel for something in the moment, you'll go back, play through it right then, and fucking
Well, especially when
it doesn't even
I don't have a feel for this game. I
right.
have no plans on playing it again. I'm not interested in using the RPG. I'm not interested in using the machine gun. I don't care about getting the highest difficulty ending. And I wish I did. But I just don't. That's just the way it is. I
I
played it.
think there are a lot
I
of
bought it
people
and I
who
played
would
it.
I think there are a lot of people who would play through this for the one-time playthrough just to have the experience and then would be done with it a lot like you. But I think if you're a more hardcore fan of horror like this, like I am, like you're very inclined to just
Mhm.
love the hell out of it.
I've
Deadly
beaten.
Premonition is the only other game that I think comes close to feeling as good as this.
Oof. Deadly Premonition did some really good scares.
Deadly Premonition is fucking sweet, and if you disagree, you're wrong.
It is
It is
sweet.
one of the best games ever
It's
made.
Twin Peaks the game. How do you complain about that? I thought it was good. I don't think it's great, but it was good.
I think it's fucking excellent. I am such a fan of horror in general, man. Like you'll very rarely find a horror game where I'm not like, this was an amazing thing that you did. Good fucking job.
All right.
There's so much good horror that goes underappreciated, and I'm a fan of like if it's bad, if it's so good that bad that it's good. You know what I mean? that hits me right. If it's just bad, but I still see good shit, that always hits me right. There's a lot that goes with that.
Are you gonna play Madison?
I looked at it. I might.
Interesting. You have to let me know how that goes.
Ye-
So I'm gonna finish this out with some of the funniest qualms that I have with this game that are just hysterical in my opinion. This game is buggy as fuck.
The physics engine is gorgeous. It's so bad, it's amazing.
I had
Some shit is
breakdancing
so broken.
zombies that were so fucking funny. I had characters flying over areas. I had I had like vehicles that were just like glitched out into like the bridge section. It was so good.
Did you get any of the deaths where Sebastian gets like slingshot flung across the
Yes.
map by something small? I love that. So this fucking game is hilarious,
Oh
dude.
my god, it was so good. And I loved those little guys that crawl out of stuff and you step on them and they pop because they have no retention. So if you actually look at your feet as you step on them, they just pop out of existence. I loved it. It's so funny.
One of the
Holy
best
shit.
engines, dude. Honestly, they refined some things in the Evil Within 2 engine, but not very much. No, they left a
Oh,
lot of the shit that made it really fucking horribly good when they made the sequel, and it
that's
is
so
just
funny.
as funny to look at.
A couple other little qualms I had. Obviously the aiming system is a lot better now because
Outdated for sure.
holy shit, if my cursor is on an enemy's head, the bullet should not go 12 feet to the left. That is
It
dumb.
is it is the first game of its kind to introduce what Resident Evil introduced later with the critical hit system, where you have to wait for the recoil of the pistol or any gun to go all the way back down in order to land substantial hits.
X. And then you just
It's a game
increase
of
your accuracy and
timing.
your criticals, and then you don't have to worry about it anymore.
Yeah,
Once I got
yeah, you get
halfway
all
through the
that shit
game, I was like,
done.
whatever.
Yeah, you get all that shit done, it becomes a lot easier. But in the very beginning, it's about trigger discipline and control.
Mhm.
It's more about finding ways around things than it is fighting your way through things because you're going to want that ammunition. For big things they throw at you, you're really going to want your ammunition and not waste it on small shit. Some things
Unless
are
you
bullet
learn
sponges,
how to completely destroy the game like I did.
right? Some things are bullet sponges
Hmm.
regardless, though. You
Use the
know,
sniper rifle on big enemies. Save your magnum ammo. Shotgun should be
same
leveled up. Your crit on the shotgun should be leveled up. You can cheese the entire game.
same idea as Resident Evil 4 in a lot of instances.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. And
You
once
can,
I got past that, I was like, okay, whatever. But this is
yeah,
like the slog I'm talking about. Like that first 3 chapters was just slog.
yeah, I get that. I'm less. I feel like it was less of a slog just because I'm into the varying mechanics and shit that
Hmm.
make it what it is. It's more of a tour than it is a game in the beginning, but that's just me. I'm a fan of that.
Absolutely. Like, I think some of the earlier segments had some of the most interesting things to look at, like
Right.
the blood pool and the chainsaw guy,
And
and all that stuff
that's
was
what they want
so
you.
cool.
That's what they want you thinking about in the moment is what you're looking at, not what you're fighting.
Right.
Later on, there's still cool stuff to look at, but they really want your eyes focused on the fucking swarms of enemies they're about to throw at you. Because boy, does the game throw a lot of enemies at you.
When it can, yeah. Yeah, the fighting segments were a lot of fun. I hated the ending. The ending fight scene was garbage. Dumb. Didn't like it. It's just subjective though.
Disappointing final boss.
Did
I
you see
agree.
me cheese it?
Yeah.
I,
Disappointing final boss. I played that boss a few times. It's the same every time. It's real disappointing. It's
okay.
like the ending to Resident Evil 7 though, I love that game also, but that game had such a fucking disappointing ending and I'm willing to admit that. The
Hmm.
last boss is literally stand with the magnum, empty a magnum clip, wait to get grabbed and then continuously hit the fire button when you pick up the other thing
Right.
and it's over.
So during the last boss fight, you get a rocket launcher when you're impaled on a piece of barbed wire, right?
Right.
I shot all 10 rounds and still died. And I was like, okay, that's dumb. I hit all of the crit points on this boss and still died. Knew about the health retention system, closed the game, relaunched the game so that way that line of code would be reset to 0 or null. So that way Ruvik would have full health, right?
Right.
Turns out, if you shoot one rocket dead center of the screen, as soon as you get the rocket launcher, it is an immediate win.
It's supposed to be like Resident Evil 4. Like, you're just supposed to pick it up and fucking use it, right?
Immediate
You
win,
use
though.
it.
Immediate
It's a
win.
right. It's a timing thing. It's a timing thing. If you use it too late, it's too late.
10 rockets. You only need one. Just shoot it right in the middle of the screen. He will move his head right in front of that rocket, and you will immediately win. You will not have to shoot him 4 times at the critical points that are all super highlighted and cheesy. Oh.
No, yeah, fuck all that. That's a distraction. That's
I was just like, this is dumb. Why?
fuck the critical point. Shoot it in the face, man. What's wrong with you?
Just when it happened, like in the moment, I was just like, fuck, bro. Like all this built up to this. And then he takes out the slide 45 and you have to shoot Ruvik in the face. So I let him die. Which, by the way, if you go back and you watch my playthrough, it is a 2-frame difference between my first shot and my second shot on both my attempts. That when I die and when I win. It is fucking 2 frames.
Yeah.
Oh, that really made me mad. And I'm like, do they just intentionally kill you there? Like is there no
Yeah.
winning your first time? Did you always lose your first time?
There are a lot of games like that. This game tracks your death. I don't know if it's like that the
Yeah,
first time,
42.
every time for everyone, but
That
I
was
mean, I
dumb.
know it does.
And I didn't know this, but I left the game on at one point. So like 30 of my deaths are just me not at my computer. Oh. What
If
else?
you start to die enough, the nurse will make jokes about you dying, and
Mhm.
that's one of the funniest things about the game.
It is super funny. I like when she's like, "Did you forget something?" It's like, oh, when you don't save and you're running towards the mirror, she's like, "Did you forget something?" And you're like, "Oh fuck, I gotta save."
It's little shit like that that makes me love this game because like
Yeah,
it's a long game. You forget to save, that's hours of progress probably.
this comes back to my checkpoint issue. This game is very generous with checkpoints.
Yeah.
Very generous with checkpoints. If you forget to save, sure, it can be an hour loss if you immediately load in and die. But if you get like 15 minutes into the level, you're fine. And
Checkpoints are weighed by difficulty. Higher the difficulty, less checkpoints.
yes, which is a cool system. I like that.
Right.
Oh, what
It's
else?
still kind of lenient though.
The machine gun section was so dumb. Hated it. Was okay. You know how you can like craft the agony stuff?
Yeah.
Now we're just getting into like mild qualms. The flash one is completely useless. Did you know that? It's literally a meme.
That is only true if you use it more than one time. There's really only one segment in the game where you need to use it, and it's just to like run past a crowd.
But I could just line them up and use a shotgun.
No, but I mean, like, if you just didn't want to, if you wanted to say fuck it to killing anything, just like use the flash and run. Because fuck it, you know? It's a lot faster to not have to blast your way through like 12 enemies.
Yeah, but then you don't get the goop, and you don't get the
Yeah,
drops.
yeah, you don't get the goop, but like that's speed running. You know what I mean? That's
Yeah,
a
that's
speedrunner
true.
thing. That's what it's made for.
And G plus. I mean, if you really don't give a shit, but like, goddamn, that is the most useless item in that game.
Yeah.
And what I found out was, and this is a pro tip for anybody who wants to play it and is watching this, and they're like, "Oh yeah, I want to play that." The shock bolts leveled up the duration on the shock bolt all the way, and you could cheese literally every boss.
The Agony crossbow is broken. The whole game's focus is centered on it. It is the weapon of the game.
Mhm. But I mean, only the shock bolts, because the gun's actually DPS higher.
I think I can end this right. We need to give a shout out to the real hero of the Evil Within, Leslie.
Leslie's a legend. Rest in peace.
Yeah. Leslie's the shit, was the best character, did everything right, was the most innocent person involved in the entire thing.
The qualms.
Leslie was just fucking crazy.
Leslie. Okay, here's a secret for everybody. I don't know if everybody was paying attention. Throughout the game, there are different particle effects that occur around the player, right? There's a literal cloud in the programming that follows Castellanos. Blood in the air means Ruvik is in control of that general area. If it is dust particles, it's typically just regular zombie type enemies in your area, maybe a basic boss, no big deal. Smoldering ash is the girl. Bubbles that are shining is Leslie is near. That is some of the ways that you can know what's happening. This is psychological information that you're supposed to pick up on to figure out the deeper seated story. You can understand what's happening in front of you. Why is the consciousness being displayed the way it is? I'm using consciousness in a way of level design, obviously, because that's how it works. Super fascinating. Did you know Castellanos' color is a shiny silver color that floats throughout the air?
Right, it's supposed to be fucking metal dust.
Right. Um, Kidman's is literal nothingness. It's nihilism. There's nothing. And like
She doesn't give a
Joseph's
shit.
is like a
She-
rainbowy color, I believe. Found that super cool.
he's Joseph was incredibly innocent and caught up in the wrong place at the wrong time. He doesn't matter though. That's his big non-importance. The rainbows kind of to signify like the innocence of Joseph and the whole
But he
situation.
does matter. That's the
He
that's the whole thing.
barely matters.
Castellanos genuinely does care for Joseph.
Right. But at that point, he's just a tool to punish him later on for being a shit.
See, that's
If
where
you're
I
if
get
you're
a
not
little
emotionally if you're not emotionally invested in Sebastian, you can't be emotionally invested in the things that he's invested in. You
right.
know what I mean? So that's kind of like a qualm I have with your whole stuff. Because like if you do care about who he cares about, then like you
Oh, I
obviously
don't
care
care about
about him and
Joseph.
your arguments. But see, that's just it, right? If he's an uncareable character, then he's totally meaningless. Whereas like Leslie has genuine impact on the world around you and is shown to be incredibly literally empty-minded.
Right.
That's the whole shtick of it. The
And
impact
I
comes
love
from the
Leslie.
random things that come from it.
I love Leslie for so many reasons. His consciousness has the ability to manipulate STEM. He has way more power over STEM than anybody who is what do they call it? Starts with the C. Con the
I don't
word for it.
remember.
Starts with the C. But anyways, he can manipulate things around in STEM, which is why if you're with Leslie, you're usually safer, which is what we saw with Kidman because he can repress a lot of that by pretty much making what we would consider like a
Right.
null zone.
The hospital is a creation of Leslie's doing. It's a
Facts.
safe space.
Leslie
You-
and Castellanos. It's a
right.
combination. Leslie gets further away from it, which is one of the reasons why it degrades. It's also a significant factor to Castellanos' mental degradation as well.
Right.
One of the reasons why Leslie is so afraid of everybody is because of the darkness represented within those three characters as they try to quote unquote help him. Obviously, Kidman has ulterior motives, which plays into that. I like all of that. I like that sub storytelling. That was fun, but I don't give a fuck.
Right, but that's the same argument to be made for you about like tons of things. In general, I said this earlier, in general with games like this, you usually don't give a fuck.
Right. Well, the way I see Leslie is the same way I see Alessa in Silent Hill. Leslie is super important, but he is not an antagonist or a protagonist.
Is that true of Silent Hill though? Because Alessa is kind of fucking evil.
No,
kind of like
Alessa isn't evil.
genuinely evil. Alessa is tortured at first and becomes evil, very evil.
No,
Like
Alessa never.
like stone solid fucking evil. Uses another human being to torment someone kind of evil.
Alessa never did that.
That is literally what happens in Silent Hill Downpour. That
It's
is
not.
Silent Hill.
God
It's
damn it!
Silent Hill
You did this on purpose.
it's Silent Hill using Murphy Pendleton to torture what's her name, and that's all Alessa's doing.
Yeah, but that's Downpour. That's not canon to Team
That is
Silent.
abso-fucking-lutely canon to Silent Hill
No,
as a
it's
whole,
not
though.
canon to
Like,
Team
whether or
Silent.
not
I'm
I don't
talking about
care
1 through
about
3.
just teams. Like, if that's all your idea, but what about 4? Silent Hill 4 is awesome, and you know it. I know you don't like it as much as I do. I think
Silent
it was
Hill.
great.
When I'm talking about Alessa, I'm talking about the original writer's intentions. I know that Alessa became something different over the course
But
of the franchise.
but that happens naturally with every character. Characters change. Who's to say that that wouldn't have been the perspective of the writers originally, though?
Because we have 3.
I
I know
mean,
you
who's
don't
to
like
say they
3.
would have I mean, who's to say they would have done it any differently? 3 is a strange situation where they were forced to do something they didn't wanna do.
True.
It was supposed to be a totally different game, and I honestly think in that instance, it may have been a better game if they had just been left alone.
Yeah, I agree. 1 and 2 would have been a perfect ending.
Alright, it should have been an anthology.
Because 1 literally wraps everything up. And it's like, this is what happened.
Right, and then 2 is about James Sunderland. You don't need to know anything about Silent Hill, you're just there for the fucking tragic story of James Sunderland's wife.
And also, if you play Silent Hill 2, you know that Harry Mason's notes are strewn around Silent Hill.
Right, you know he's been there, he's just
He's
not,
there.
like
He's there when you're there. It's the same time period. He's just
it's just
ahead
a
of
matter
you.
of, like it's honestly, like and I feel like Silent Hill 3, if they had done the original idea, would have gone that same route, would have taken that exact same route and done the
Well,
same thing.
Alessa is a tragedy. Leslie is a tragedy. They're both tragedies. Alessa was
Yeah,
being forced to carry the womb of a demon.
but, like
Leslie is being forced to resolve a demon,
okay,
essentially.
in this instance, Ruvik is a tragedy like
Oh, of
Alessa
course,
is
they
a
both
tragedy.
are. Yeah.
But but Leslie is a tragedy in the same way that I can't even believe I'm saying this. Ethan is a tragedy. An innocent nobody
True.
in the wrong place at the wrong time. He's not trained for it. He knows very little about it and is just doing what he can to protect everyone.
I
Like
100% agree.
an innocent bystander in the wrong place at the wrong time.
But Ruvik is he was twisted before he went in.
Yeah, but that's not blamable on Ruvik. That's blamable
No, of
on the
course not. It's
doctor.
blamable on the doctor because Ruvik could have never been introduced
Right.
to the STEM project. He could have been killed or removed from the project or ousted or
Right.
put in jail for killing
Ultimately,
his family. Like there's a bunch of other things that could have transpired to stop the events of Evil Within, but then we wouldn't have the Evil Within. So blah 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 blah.
yeah, ultimately, like what happened to Ruvik is a great tragedy, and that is just how that goes. Very similar to Alessa, and that and they even use the fire. Like I fully believe that is the inspiration they took for the character of Ruvik.
The event with the fire.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think as well. I think that twisted his psyche a lot. But I mean, Alessa's a different kind of tragedy. In the fire that occurred was an accident. She wasn't meant to be burned. She wasn't meant to be put in the hospital.
but
The
that's just
events.
what. But that's just what what's her name tells you. That's not
No, no, she doesn't
like
tell you that. Gillespie hides all of that. It's in the understory. Gillespie lies to you the whole entire time. The mom, she lies to you because she's using Harry to reactivate the Mark of Samael, and she calls it something else, the Steel of Metatron or whatever.
right.
And that's a lie to
They do
trick
that same
him.
thing. They do that same thing. Claudia does that same thing to Heather in Silent Hill 3, and that was one of the things I
Yes.
hated the most about that game is that I honestly like I've played through the original Silent Hill a couple of times now since our last excursion with it.
Hmm.
And I think that's a subjective viewpoint. I think because of the two separate canon endings that could both equally be real, there's a lot of room for debate on whether or not she was lying to you at all. Like that
Well,
is an open, debatable question.
if I may, if you do a pacifist playthrough as Harry, which is the intended route, instead of the demon being born, an angel is born. That is Alessa's soul. You are putting to rest Alessa's soul. But because of 3, the canon ending is obviously Harry runs through, kills monsters, does his thing, and then the demon is born, and then Heather is born from him slaying the demon because a baby must be born. The consciousness does not fade unless an angelic presence is created, which is in the story. So,
But like, but at that exact same time, this is not
it's complicated.
fucking the ending that I'm talking about. That's not the ending that the angel baby's like a reward for you being a nice guy throughout. That's not the ending that I'm
It's
talking
it's
about.
actually considered the worst ending because it's the most uncanon next to the UFO ending and the dog ending. The canon ending is Heather is born because the souls are merged and then the demon is slayed. Isn't that wild?
Yeah.
Yeah. Silent Hill is wild. It's wild, dude. The fandom is crazy. There's like full on documentaries where they go over like every single detail, and it's like 6 hours long just to tell you what I just told you because that's how divisive the game is.
Yeah.
Wild stuff. But okay, so if you had to rate Evil Within,
8.5 out of 10. It's not a 10 out of 10 for me. It's not a 9 out of 10 for me. 8.5 out of 10. There are some things that are clearly dated.
mhm.
There are a lot of things I probably would have done a little differently, but it's still a fucking masterpiece and another Shinji Mikami brainchild that is so worth it. I am not quite the same as you. I think if you've never played a horror game, it is a really good one to introduce yourself to that kind of horror.
No, I agree. But my score is definitely like a 6 out of 10.
Man,
Yeah,
that hurts.
I know. But here's my reasoning. Number one, it's a beatable game. The writing is phenomenal. The storytelling is
Suddenly,
phenomenal.
suddenly, every 10 out of 10 ever becomes a 9 out of 10 because they are beatable games. You heard it here first.
If it is a 5 out of
Fun
10,
point
you can
lost.
beat it. If you can't beat it, it's 5 or lower. my my rating system's going to be in all scrutiny now. Oh. But it's a beatable game. The story is worth it. If you like psychological stuff, there's enough there for you to delve into. Sure, there's cheesy moments. The framing is a little weird, but the characters are fun. The voice acting is cheesy. I
This is
mean,
for Resident Evil fans.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do I think you should play it? Markiplier has a full playlist of it. Just go watch him play it.
Yeah, or instead of watching a years old playthrough of a game, you could watch like your playthrough of it or something you could plug yourself.
Ooh, I don't know if I want to recommend
Man, that would
mine.
have been like a genius idea. I would totally recommend your playthrough, but only like if you play the game first, maybe. Or if you just want to like laugh at the game without playing it, you just watch your playthrough. Just promote yourself. Don't be afraid to promote yourself.
The only reason why I'm not promoting myself here, and of course, if you're interested in seeing me literally get so frustrated and scream the F word at this game, watch my playthrough. It's a good time. It's funny. I get very upset with very minor things. That's who I am. What I do. But if you're looking for somebody who's in love with this game, Markiplier.
Yeah. Yeah, he
It,
really did show it the love and care it needed. He played both of them.
mm-hmm.
I do not recommend watching a playthrough. I don't think the experience is the same, honestly. I think some games it is, but with this game in particular, like 90% of the best part of the experience is you playing the game and figuring out the patterns that go with that.
Oh yeah, it's if you've never seen it or played it, it is 100% worth picking up.
Yeah.
100%. Just be ready to be frustrated if you think like I do.
Be ready to be frustrated in general. It's a pretty hard game.
It is a very hard game. Very hard game. Until you learn how to cheese it. But again, that's the point of the NG Plus. If it's your kind of game, it's the point.
It's your kind of cheese. What's the
It
point?
is.
I like cheese.
You like my cheese.
I
Oh.
want to go get some cheese after this.
Play with a controller. The mouse and keyboard settings are
Don't.
garbage.
That's not true. I disagree. You should
Garbage.
never play a shooter with a controller. I think there's a small amount of disabling mouse acceleration that needs to be done, but the mouse and keyboard is better.
Oh my god, I didn't even think of that. I was playing at 165 frames per second until I
Yeah,
switched to
that'll ruin
controller.
it.
Oh
That'll
my
fucking ruin
god, I'm a dumbass. Oh, and
it. It would have been
also
so much better.
lock your frame rate to 55 if you have a 60 frames per second monitor. If you have a cheaper monitor or a TV, lock it to 30 frames per second. Trust me, it'll save you a headache. So many
And
headaches were stopped.
you'll get really good performance for like what is ultimately a pretty cinematic experience.
The animations glitch out after 100 FPS. Just a heads up. If you want to fuck with the physics engine, run it at 165, put it on easy. Super funny things will happen. Super great.
It's worth noting that this game somehow ran on the Xbox 360 and PlayStation 3.
That's what I originally played on. It was PlayStation 3.
Right. One of those strange cases like Grand Theft Auto 5 where it definitely was not made for those consoles, but it still ran and was fully playable
Mhm.
somehow.
I don't hate this game. I want to re-clarify that because I'm sure listening to me talk about this makes it sound like I hate this game. I don't. I don't. There is so much to love. It's just not for me.
Fair enough.
Do you have any closing thoughts, Red?
Go play this game. It's really good. Love you, Mikami-san. You're a literal genius. Please keep producing amazing pieces of art because like
Please, Ghostwire
we
Tokyo
need
is so
more of that.
good. I didn't really give you an opportunity to really shine a light on the parts that you really liked. Can you just do that for me real quick?
My favorite part of The Evil Within is knowing that every time I died, I would get to see a unique death animation that was totally different from something I had seen before, because there is so much diversity in the art in the game. It is one of the most visually stunning games ever made. There is absolutely nothing that can change my mind about that.
Anything else?
Not really. I mean, we've covered pretty much all the gameplay stuff. I think the story is good for what it is. Uh, I think the DLC is definitely something you have to play if you're going to play through it the first time, because there's some stuff that it fills that's, if you can get the whole thing together, get it on sale, get it on Kingwin, it's worth going through the whole of it, not just the base story mode, because like you'll miss a couple of things.
We're gonna advertise CD keys because I might have sponsorship.
Oh yeah, go check out CD Keys. I don't have that sponsorship. I'm not bound to that, but go check out CD Keys.
Yeah, I'm not bound to a sponsorship, but we, I'm working on it. I'm working
Yeah,
on it.
I know nothing about that. It's not my department.
It's not my department. You're just the word guy.
Yeah, I'm just the guy.
Well, go support Red. He's doing some cool tech stuff. You have some horror stuff you had planned on.
Yep, I do still have some horror stuff I have planned. I've talked about that a couple of times now. I've been working pretty hard on that Windows Vista PC. So when I get done with that at the end of the day, I kind of take a break and I do other shit that is not horror related, but I really need to get back to that.
Because your most recent video was the breeze is a sky mat, right?
Yeah, yeah, that was my Valorant video. That I like to do little filler bits like that.
Got you. Okay. So go check him out and give him a subscribe, a subscribble.
But also like while you're here, hit the bell so you
Yeah,
don't miss one of these.
right? I mean, I stream a lot. I make a lot of random ass shit.
And you know what, viewer? It's not a fucking party unless you're there. It's gotta have everyone here to have an
Mhm.
appropriate party.
The
Just tell your
channel is
friends,
growing.
tell your mom's friends, tell your grandma. Maybe don't tell your grandma.
No, tell your grandma, she's cool.
Yeah, she's
We go
cool.
way
Don't tell your
back.
grandma. We uh, rest in peace, Queen Elizabeth.
Yeah. Peace, Queen Elizabeth. Wild. Thought she would outlive me.
Honestly, me too.
And I guess I'll just drop a real quick because I do this every time. I am playing Saints Row 2022 next.
Oh my god.
I have to see this, and it is going to be release version 1.0, zero patches. I need to see this game in all of its
Oh
miserable
no.
glory.
Oh,
So
that's not fucking cool. Oh, that's a bad game, dude.
you're gonna love this series, Red. You know it.
Oh, it's such a bad game, dude. It's
It's
so
gonna be
bad.
so good. I'm so excited. It's been downloading all day. Because for
Oh
some
my
reason,
god.
dude, no joke, their servers are running at 1.9 megabytes a second.
I've never seen you this hype for garbage.
I love garbage from time to time. I need something. I need something after the frustration of Evil Within that I faced to make me laugh and put a smile on my face. That's just it.
Fair enough.
Bye, everybody.
Goodbye.